We've now assembled our panel of young people who will be asking questions of our very special guest speakers. The two very remarkable women whose own insight, experience, and wisdom makes them the ideal people to help us face the question, how might a young person today develop a spiritual dimension in their life? I know Laura very well. She's been a friend for many years, headmistress of St. James Senior Girls' School for, I don't know how long, 19 years. She's quite an innings. She's now Director of Education of the St. James Families of Schools worldwide, and anyone else who might wish to seek her guidance and wisdom. I know Isabelle less well, having met once, but very inspiring it was nonetheless. She's directly involved in running the Brahma Kumari's World Spiritual University, which has a network of centres worldwide. Both women have their own strong spiritual practice, which they value above all. To ask some questions, we've assembled, and this is quite a story in itself, how the panel was assembled, but that will have to wait until later. But a group of enlightened young people, and I'm going to ask them very briefly to introduce themselves so we get a flavour of their backgrounds.
Hello everyone, I'm Emily Labram. I learnt to meditate at St. James and it's become one of my greatest passions, and most recently I facilitate and volunteer with a group, a sort of movement of young people practicing mindfulness, trying to create a happier and more compassionate world. And so I volunteer every weekend. And meditation is very much part of my life.
Hello, my name's Jerome Toole, and I'm a photographer and a social entrepreneur, whatever that means. And I think trying to bring the wisdom that can be found in stillness and that insight to the work that I do is probably why I'm here to some extent.
Good evening. I'm Katie Teasdale. I'm an osteopath and yoga instructor, and I practice Vipassana meditation and have been for about 10 years, and yoga for a bit longer than that. And I could say it has saved my life a couple of times, and I continue to practice it, and I'm very thankful for the awareness of it.
Hi, I'm Romina, and I've come all the way from Morocco today to be part of this. I was really excited when I was told that I could be part of such an event where we could ask our burning questions to two very special people. I'm actually part of the Brahma Kumaris as well. I'm a Raj Yoga student, and as well as a student of nutrition, and very, very interested in discovering how we can tap into our inner resources to make changes outside. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Anna. I'm in work mode, so the first thing I would say is that I work in military psychology. I was like, well, that's not very relevant for where we are now. I met Liz in a desert in October because I love silence and I love to pray, and I don't pray enough. So that's probably why I'm here.
I'm Adrian Morgan. I read theology at Cambridge, and I'm now a curate in the church in Wales. Or I should say an assistant curate, because in actual fact my vicar is the curate of the parish, don't want to promote myself above my station too soon. And my life is a combination of stillness, prayer and contemplation, and sometimes a lot of hectic busyness, which is the normal part of parish life. But I love Jesus, and I try to share his love with the people that I serve.
Good evening. My name's Jeff Murray. I meditate, and I guess I found nothing more profound and useful than looking inside and finding a sense of peace and strength, and I found that that's possible to do.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Nick, and I'm an undergraduate linguistics student, and I'm also a student at the Brahma Kumari's World Spiritual University. I practice Raja Yoga, and silence and meditation is my walking stick.
Hello, I'm Milo. I am a master's student of cinematography. In recent months, I've come to mindful meditation partly in a bid to address my mental health, but also more generally to bring some stillness to a very noisy life.
Hello, I'm Olivia Emden. I recently graduated from Cambridge University and am now part of a theatre company as an actor. My dad is a mindfulness practitioner, and during my gap year I really came to my own with meditation. I did a silent meditation retreat in the north of India, and since then have been using meditation and mindfulness as a way of trying to find stillness in an otherwise very hectic world.
I'm tempted to say wow, so I will. Wow. So quite a panel. The outline of the evening is I'm going to ask Isabelle and Laura to tell us outline their spiritual journey up until this point, and then the panel will have an opportunity to ask questions that they may have brought with them in their minds, or that may arise from that, from their words. Also, if anybody in the audience, if there's time, would like to ask questions, Isabelle here and Rachel somewhere, Rachel there, they will have a piece of paper, pencils, so if you can indicate to them surreptitiously, if you have a question, then you can write it down, we'll bring it to the panel, and if there's time, we can pose those to our speakers. So if I can ask Isabelle to outline her spiritual journey. Thank you very much.
Well, good evening to everyone. It's an honor to be here, and never been called remarkable before. I think it's in the eyes of Liz, but let's see what you think. I've met Liz now 8 years ago when I moved to London. My spiritual path started in Canada. I'm French-Canadian, and as you know, we're quite the feisty type. We claim for independence, and we want to believe that we have something to show the English. And that was my position before, not anymore. But I was one of those feisty Quebecers, and I was brought up in a very traditional household. And things started to turn when my parents decided to embark on their spiritual path. So from traditional, what remained traditional was my upbringing. So I went to school with the nuns and the priest and so on and so forth, up to university. But at home, things changed. My mother was starting to ask herself the questions that we all deeply do. And she started to look into the Eastern philosophies. I didn't know exactly which gurus they were reading or meeting or speaking with, but at home things were happening. There was incense being burnt and initiation and chanting happening in the living room as I was trying to sleep. And all I knew was that there was a different feel at home, but my mother was more fully present, but in a different way. My father, when he saw the changes in my mother, also embarked on his path, and actually they together explored. And I would say that it was very rich, but what made me embark on my own path, and I didn't choose the path that my parents had chosen. They did Raj Yoga Patanjali, and they went to Osho, Rajneesh, all the gurus that came to the West, and they settled into Buddhism. And even though I found it very interesting, and I was asking all my questions to my father, when he had a burnout, when I was at university, I felt very, very alone. The one person I could ask my questions to that had studied and found his way was then silent. I don't know if you've been across people that are in deep depression, physically and mentally, but he was silent, a different silence. And so I was left alone with my questions and half-answered other questions, and I then decided that this would never happen to me again, that I needed to find my own guide and find within myself a stability and something that I could trust and have faith in, so that if my father left, my mother left, my support, external support left, that I would still be strong. That's all I knew. When I was asked what I wanted to do with my life, I kept saying I want to be happy. So my father was hoping I would say I want to be a doctor, a dentist, or a psychiatrist like his family were. My mother was hoping that I would not go into the traditional, what was the women would do, because she was not traditional. She was saying, you just have to find what you want to do. And I said, I want to be happy. And that was my compass. And that was the compass that I also used when I decided to find my own path. So I was not rejecting what my parents had chosen to do, but I was deciding to follow my intuition. And as in Aries that I am, quadruple, 5 times the Aries that I am, at one point when I reached the level of having, even with intuition and with hours of writing and trying to get into stillness through my own means, I decided to leave everything that I had. Sold flat car, gave my furniture away, and left my job. And with the budget that I had and the grace of drama, I had money to be able to have a year off to find what I wanted to find. And so I decided to take a one-way ticket to a destination that I chose very simply. I was not going to let any administrative detail get in the way of this journey. And so I chose Spain, and I left for Spain. And my aim at that point was to either become a secluded nun, so that I would have all the silence that I wanted and no influence, because as soon as I was getting better, as soon as I was getting the stillness inside, the influence of friends, career, ambition was coming back into my life and was making me drift away until I reached another state of imbalance and wanting to come back. So my life was very much going back and forth. So I left thinking, am I going to become a secluded nun, or am I going to find a teacher that will allow me to stay in the world and find that inner happiness? And so I went to Spain, and after a few months of trying my own way, I surrendered to a suggestion that had been made to me the day, or maybe the week before I left for Spain, which was to embark on the pilgrimage of Santiago de Compostela. And so I embarked on that pilgrimage and suffered physically for the first week, having the wrong shoes. And I thought, is that what it is? But persevered, thinking that there's nothing else. There's nothing else waiting for me in Canada. There's nothing else for me at this point than to reach that destination. And so I continued, and what happened is that there's no influence when you're on that pilgrimage. There's no television, no radio, very little to talk about, but you know, how would the poppies look like in the morning, and where we slept the night before. It was very, very quiet. And I fell in love with silence, and I fell in love with the way that I was when that stillness was constant and a daily experience. I started to be able to trust my intuitions and feel that the decisions that I was making were pillars for my future. So I came back to Canada and connected with the only one Canadian that I had met on that pilgrimage, and he was English Canadian. He was had been invited to go on that pilgrimage by the head of his church, and as a Quebecer again, that was not someone I would befriend in the past, but somehow I was so determined to continue with the signals that I was being given that I connected with him, and he guided me to meditation, even though he didn't practice, and he remained a friend up until today. And I'm very grateful for having found him on that pilgrimage and having had the wisdom to befriend him. And so when I came back to Canada with a master's in international business, I decided to move to Toronto. And in Toronto, so many opportunities for someone with such a degree. But when I met with him, I said, there's only one thing I want at this point, is to continue to be able to nourish that silence. And so I was introduced to one of his friends who had practiced meditation, and that's how I embarked on my path to spirituality and meditation. The knowledge that was shared in the practice of meditation was interesting, but what guided me was the powerful meditation experience that I was having each time I was going to the Brahma Kumari Center. And also the fact that there was no gurus. And that, with the experience that I've had with my father, was something that I resonated with. The invitation that I was given was to become myself, that I would not be more beautiful, more happy, and more powerful than to become myself. And it's a big ask, because I knew what I didn't want. I knew what was not right. I knew what I'd learned in the past, but others had told me, the authorities around me had suggested, but what is it that I truly wanted, other than happiness? It was a difficult question. And so I took up the challenge, and with my daily meditation, I would say now that it's the best way to connect with the fullness of the Spirit. And I see that if I have the discipline to do it every day, the sadness, the sorrow, the disappointments, the doubts fade away in front of the fullness of Spirit, and that I cannot and will not be happier trying to pretend or be someone else or succeed on the external. Will never, ever compare to the feelings of reconnecting with the self. My parents said, being Buddhist, we didn't talk about God in the household, and that was quite fine. And when I took up meditation and they included God in the equation, I didn't know if I was going to go in the opposite direction, but I didn't. Because he was introduced not in the Christian way, not in any way, but a very simple and loving way, that after I'd experienced myself in the fullness of the soul, I was just simply said, and he's the same, but he never got messed up. So I thought, I can accept that, and I can befriend someone like that, but does he understand? And I was told, of course, and he accepts and sees you in your full potential. So I've embarked not only on my spiritual path, but included God in my life, which I never thought. I was invited to come to England to help with a project, an international project, maybe because of my skills, my talents, but probably there was a deeper meaning and I accepted it. So again, the Aries way, left everything in Toronto without a second thought of what am I leaving behind, but what am I embracing. And so I came to London and helped with the project. And after the end of the project, 5 months later, was invited to remain. And I was quite amazed that from a very comfortable life in Toronto, that even physical comfort had lost in a way its value and interest when I felt aligned with my purpose. So aligning with myself also allowed me slowly and quietly, but on a day-to-day basis, to make choices that align me with my purpose. And so I would say that since I've been in London now 8 years, to be making the effort to flourish internally has allowed me to become what I am today. And I'm dressed in white in my own personal effort to let go of the ego of identity and positions and anything that will be external, so that I can meet you through it, truly from spirit to spirit, and that you may not even notice that I'm dressed up in white. So this is where I'm going to finish. Om Shanti.
Organization. I just have some notes just so that I don't meander. Well, it's a very, very great privilege to be able to meet together and consider what I feel is probably the most important subject, to look to the heart of life and consider together how a soul finds its way. And I would just like to put my reflections a little bit in context before describing something of the journey so far. The spiritual search has always been at the center of my life for as long as I can remember. However, I'm very much aware that there is nothing special about a particular life. And as human beings, we are all drawn to the same search. And the individual human being is a tiny, tiny, almost irrelevant appearance on the wave of the ocean. So the story that we tell isn't really of any particular significance in the real scheme of things. But there are a couple of things that are very clear so far. One is that the ultimate reality or truth isn't something that will be known as an object or experienced as an object, subject-object. And also, whatever we imagine, and this I have found time and time again, however we imagine that truth might be, however beautiful our concepts may be, however refined, and however we think that we might realize what we seek to discover, it never is as we had imagined or hoped. It just isn't. It is always different. And the third point that has become very clear over time is that where we might think that we are in control in the search, we are absolutely not. And as Hamlet said to his dearest friend, there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. And there are powers at work over which we have absolutely no control and no knowledge. So what is the spiritual journey all about as we know it? There is a gravitational pull within us all which is extremely powerful as human beings. It's a yearning, we might say, to go home, a yearning for completion, a yearning for fulfillment, a yearning for the fullness of love, a yearning for union. And in a way, it is the most central and most powerful force in our humanity. How we attempt to realize that fulfillment, that completion, that union, obviously differs hugely from soul to soul. We seek it materially, we seek it intellectually, we seek it emotionally, we seek it creatively, and we seek it spiritually. But actually we are all seeking to go home. So the spiritual aspirant is powerful, or the aspirant is powerful, and it is looking to acquire completion. So in a way, the first question is, who or what is this aspirant? From where does it come? What is its origin? And this is where I can refer a little bit to my own story as it has emerged. I remember as a very, very young baby being aware, this is a very sort of shadow sense, because there was no sense of my physical body and no particular sense of identity. But there was a sense that I had somehow left the light and was experiencing darkness. And I can only use the word I because it's meaningful, but there obviously wasn't a sense of I. There was a sense of having left home, left the light, and a prevailing sense of darkness. And that impression, because I think that's the only way one can describe it, seems to me to have caused the search. Somehow the sense was that one had left the origin, left home. And then life unfolds and one seeks love in relationship. Love in relationship as a child to parent, as a lover as one grows up, and also in spiritual devotion, all seeking the expression of love and seeking union. My schooling wasn't of much interest to me because no one seemed to speak anything particularly meaningful, not at the level that I was searching for. I did, as a young person, have a sense that I wanted to express and experience something devotional. I was drawn to my Jewish faith, which I knew very little about, only so far as I quite wanted to sing in a choir. There was something seeking devotional experience. And a little later with my friend, I took up some practice of Christianity. As adolescence locked in, I can say with great feeling looking back that it was absolutely awful. It was an experience, probably more awful for those around me than it was for myself, but it was an experience of complete darkness and chaos. And those are the two words that distill themselves. Darkness through and through, and chaos. And thank goodness my poor parents are not here, but if they were, they would tell you that their experience was much worse of me. But that's how it was. And then interesting things began to emerge. I spent my weekends when I should have been studying for A-levels cooking for the down and outs of London in a charity, a community which had just started called St. Mungo. And here is an example of how truly spontaneous things happen that are completely out of control, out of the control of the so-called individual. I had finished what I had been doing, and I was walking away from the house in Battersea, walking down the road, and suddenly, completely unrelated to the circumstances in which I was in, there was spontaneous knowledge containing three parts. One was, there was nothing in the world, in the ordinary world, worth seeking. The second was that I needed to learn to meditate. And the third was that there was a deeper knowledge which I had nothing I didn't have and needed to be sought. And there was a threefold spontaneous realization. I was 15, and I sought out meditation, and that experience was life-transforming. It was like my spirit had been born. And what was known in meditation right from the beginning was a very simple but profound truth. It was that I myself was free, and the world of thought, emotion, and becoming that we call human experience was quite distinct from that self. The freedom was absolutely unequivocal. And it transformed the experience of life as I had known it. After about a year, something sort of said that what had opened up in meditation needed the support of knowledge. I didn't really know what that meant. But my parents were in the School of Economic Science. They quite wisely didn't tell me anything about it. But I had some sense that if I went there, I would find the knowledge that would support what had opened up in meditation. I'll tell you a little bit about that in a moment. The next spontaneous intervention, which was extremely simple but important, was that I was, by this time, I'd finished school, and so I must have been about 19. I didn't really know what to do with my life. I was at a lecture, the substance of which was completely irrelevant to what I'm about to say. And as I was sitting there, regardless of what the speaker was saying, suddenly something said, "You must teach." Literally out of the blue. It had total authority in the same way that the previous spontaneous instruction had, and it was the wrong time of year, and I didn't have the appropriate qualifications, but it was absolutely authoritative, and I went forward, got myself a place in a training college, as they then were, did 3 years teachers training, etc. Then I was working within the School of Economic Science and became very close to the leader of the school, Leon McLaren, with whom I then spent the next, 40 years probably, very much as his pupil. And that was a most extraordinary blessing. I think, looking back, the effect of really refined company is huge in relation to any stage of life in development. But his company resonated with my soul at a very, very deep level in two respects, well, three actually. One was a sense of renunciation, which was a very deep resonance in my own being. The second was the vast expanse of unknowing. And the third was the universal commitment to a life of service. Those three aspects were right in the center of my soul and were at the core of his. The next spontaneous, in a way, awakening which took place was again unexpected, unrelated to time and place, and is very, very difficult to describe, so you have to perhaps just bear with me. I'll do my best. It was, I think, in a period of meditation, that's as I recall, and there was in the silence a revelation which was extraordinarily powerful. And in essence, what was seen or revealed was that, here words are so clumsy really, everything was a single outpouring of love. And that's all. There were no forms, there was no subject or object. There was just this totality of absolute love. And this was understood, again the words are inappropriate, as all and everything. I don't know what the time period of this was, but after a period, there was a response from within that simply knew that the human instrument, in light and amidst this totality of love, is only there to join that very flow. The life has no other purpose. This was as it was understood. So if anything had been asked, it would have been done. There was no other purpose. And as events unfolded, it was asked of me whether I would go into St. James and look after the next period of the school's development. And I would now just like to turn to, I think, the most important point that I would like to convey, and that is that meditation, contemplation, prayer, it doesn't really matter how one, as it were, enters the deep. But what does matter is that the life is anchored in being and anchored in the vision of the heart. And in meditation or prayer or contemplation, that is where one touches the source. And from there, everything is possible. And there are really two levels. There is the fathomless substratum, which is love, and in a way, nothing is happening. Nothing at all. And within that, we have this business of life. And they're not different. One is an expression. The forms and the movement is an expression of the fathomless. And it truly is all one. But the human instrument needs to touch the depths as it swims through the ocean. So, interestingly, or perhaps not interestingly, where I find myself now is more in unknowing than ever before, and maybe that is just as it should be. And I'd just like to end with a very short quotation, which I have always found very beautiful, from Julian of Norwich in one of her revelations. And she says this: "And from the time that the vision was shown, I desired often to know what our Lord's meaning was. And 15 years and more afterward, I was answered in my spiritual understanding thus: would you know your Lord's meaning in this thing? Know it well. Love was his meaning. Who showed it to you? Love. What did he show you? Love. Why did he show it? For love. Keep yourself therein, and you shall know and understand more in the same. But you shall never know nor understand any other thing forever. Thus was I taught that love was our Lord's meaning."
Thank you both very much indeed for your openness and your honesty. So I'm going to turn to our panelists. Who would like to ask the first question? If you could indicate who you'd like the answer from, that would be helpful to our speakers.
Thank you. I had a question for both of you, actually, and I was hoping that each one of you answers it. Isabelle spoke about bringing the divine into the equation of her spiritual path. And Laura spoke about this idea of receiving maybe touchings or messages, spontaneous messages from an authority. How can we, from our generation, connect to the divine or connect to this higher power that both of you mentioned? Sometimes we feel that he may not have a concrete identity, or it seems that sometimes it's difficult to connect to the divine. What is your experience of that?
Well, I was grateful that I was offered with some kind of introduction of the divine, because in my search, the person that inspired me to go to Spain was actually a teacher from college, and he had studied to become a Jesuit, and at one point he had not become a Jesuit, married and decided to become a teacher, but he had all the books. And one day I was at his home with his family, and he was getting rid of all his books, and one of them was the lexicon for the Bible. And I said, I will, no problem, have that book. And I dived into it, and I don't read very much, so I went straight to what I wanted to know. So I looked for God. And the answer disappointed me so much that I was still dangling between, how can I link with someone that I don't really know? How can I surrender my heart, my faith to someone that seemed to be held, in a very subtle way in the minds of few? So when I started the meditation, and I had such a powerful experience of the soul, and I was given the idea that maybe God is also a soul, and maybe God is and will always be pure and full. and that the more I am in his company, and yes, it's a most refined company, but in the silence is as if you enter his world and you can feel him, you can hear him. And so since then, my daily practice has been at very early in the morning to bathe in that silence and to allow my mind to be just in the spirit of peace. And within that effort to become myself in a soul way, turn towards him and see how he can help me expand that. So that simple definition has allowed me to not only see myself, but hear myself. And he's showing me another part or a fuller part of me, that when I come out of meditation, I feel more alive than ever, and I look forward to my every single day.
Well, I thought the question was really beautiful. It's the ultimate question, really. I think there are a few things, but they have more to do with not picking up. So, for example, a sort of inner discipline that you don't claim the results of action. And if the ego gets involved, it's letting go, letting go, letting go, not accumulating. Because I think the key issue is that the heart needs to remain open and pure. And by that I just mean simple and not weighed down by claim. Forgiveness is important, and a continual readiness to give. So I think that's all really.
I was trying to think of the bravest question I could ask, so forgive me if it's either provocative or whatever. I had a spiritual experience when I was 21 and experienced God, and it was wonderful. And then everything kind of fell apart again. And was reflecting in the prayer time about how I experience my life as this kind of coming together and falling apart. And you've both taught beautifully about these revelations and insights. And I wondered, how do you manage, or what disciplines or tips are there to manage when things seem to fall apart, and the things that happen in between the steadiness, in between the insights, and in between the experiences of love?
Well, thank you for the question. It's true that somehow when the hand holds on to, or the soul holds on to something new, that the old has to fade away. And the most maybe relevant image that I can use is the soul is made of gold, and there's a lot of alloy mixed in it. And when you truly see the gold and forget about the alloy and face with the fire that God can feel like, even though it's a very loving fire, everything melts away and you're formless. You're identityless. You're just melted gold. And the path begins, I think. When I feel comfortable and happy, I know that I'm actually being lazy and careless. there's no rest for, for those who embarked on the path, really. It's more a question of how do I make my next decision? And when we move away from the identity, the emotions, and the desires, and the likes and the dislikes, we just trust that making the next decision from a pure heart will allow me to form again. And without the alloy, without the supports, and without the expectations. So I would say that the challenging periods are the richest periods. And that's truly where we can maybe have faith and trust that what we were revealed, or what we truly, the Spirit, understands, that I let that lead the way in the next step.
Yes, I support that totally. I think maybe there is a misconception, and I'm not sure whether it's in your question, but it's a misconception which I think that we all tend to embrace in a way. I don't think, looking back certainly on my life as it's emerged, I can't see things getting better. I don't see a progress gradient. And perhaps if one imagines there should be, maybe that's a misconception. Because I think there are so many misconceptions. And rather, as I said at the beginning, most of our conceptions need to be shed. And just as Isabelle has just said, what we either overtly or discreetly name as a bad experience isn't so. There is experience, and there is something to learn in all situations. And again, we tend to ascribe a judgment to those experiences wrongly. So transformation, liberation comes in all kinds of ways, not as one conceives of it. And our conceptions are very dualistic. You know, we think spiritual experiences like this and not like this. And it just isn't necessarily so.
I was really impressed and touched by your descriptions of love. And I wanted to know what your advice is for nourishing and touching into that feeling and sustaining that feeling of love when life is busy, stressful, and I tend to find myself that I lose touch with presence and also with love. So any practices that you have, ways to keep it going, I would be grateful to hear.
Love. I think that it's the most valuable thing in the world today. The way I understood love, yes, love is an experience, but I think that if you want to be able to sustain it, you somehow have to define. So my working definition of love is wanting the best for someone. And when I understand that I, the spirit, the soul, am a peaceful and loving being, therefore, to be able to nourish that is again how to be myself. The best way of giving, and we see that in children, young babies, when they are just present, they can shift our moods just with a smile. And how do they do that? They're just present without wanting anything, without asking or expecting anything of us. And it just transforms us. And we wouldn't say they gave me a smile, they just smiled. And I have that same experience that if I know what is best for the soul, and of course in wanting to know what the best is, offering that to that presence of the divine, there's an openness to expand that love, but I would say purify that love. So wanting the best for myself when I was a child might have been to have a bicycle. But now that I've embarked on the path is those moments of silence and that capacity to hear myself, to see myself, to treat myself with great respect and to offer that to the world.
I think that acceptance is extremely key. And it's acceptance of everything within your own nature first. And that is easily said, but it's actually quite profound. So acceptance, and it's a loving acceptance of that which you might, in other respects, reject. So the fullness of acceptance about oneself, one's human nature, completely, is the key issue. And when that starts to happen, there is the same acceptance everywhere else. And acceptance and love are very, very closely intertwined. So is forgiveness. So really, the word forgiveness, acceptance, and love are the same. And then there are very simple things. A decision in your own personal practice not to repeat those things, not to habituate those things which are hateful or destructive or the opposite of love. Repeated criticism is extremely corrosive. And if you favor love, then you won't practice repeated criticism. When you face really difficult situations within yourself and within your immediate life, you realize a simple thing, which is that human beings act according to the way they act because of human nature. And that can be loved, not despised. And that understanding, I think, just grows with experience and time. But corrosive judgment, criticism of others will take you into a very caustic state of the heart, which can be avoided. The other is not to accumulate resentment, and that, of course, is akin to forgiveness. All kinds of experiences come our way. People will behave horribly towards us. We will have to receive all kinds of things in our life. But to accept in the way that I have described doesn't mean to say you don't deal with situations, you do, but deeply inwardly, you do not accumulate acidic resentment. You let go. And that is a necessary protection to the love in the heart.
Hello? The question that's come from the floor is this: how do we put down the ego? And I suppose I want to add a few of my own thoughts to that, thinking about the thesis of the second speaker. You seem to suggest that the heart, at its very essence, is pure, that there is a perfect love there, and that through meditation, what you call the human instrument can delve into the depths of this perfect love. And you speak about letting go of resentment and forgiveness. But coming back to the question, isn't it true that we're always plagued by the complexities of our human nature, by our own ego, by our own selfishness, and our own greed? And isn't it those qualities of human nature that's really at the center of the heart? So my question would be, where does that forgiveness come from? And actually, what do we do if we do fail to put down the ego? If we fail to put down our own human selfishness and greed, doesn't that make us failures? And doesn't that make us in some way hate ourselves? So what is the role of grace in all of this? And, you know, where does this pattern for true and perfect love really come from? Is it in the heart, in the human heart, or is it outside of the human heart? And I suppose, you know, my question comes from my own theological perspective, but I'd appreciate your thoughts.
Here again, we're hampered by terminology, and when I've made reference to within or to the heart, and if I've used the word human, I'm not really referring to it as something that relates, as it were, to me. It is not personal. It's the heart, if you like. And you referred to a really important word in this, which is grace. And there is grace, and we can't command it. But it's a mighty, mighty power. What you describe as the failings, the human failings, yes, ego is always hungry. But that is the nature of things. That is the lot for the human being. And again, my experience is that if one understands that, it allows a far, far more gentle response. It is a matter of understanding. And the ego, as we describe it, is born of fear. And that is an existential fear, which refers very much to what I was trying to describe when I first spoke. This sense of somehow being separated from our source, from home. And the first experience then is fear. And fear gives rise to the need to acquire, to get. And that getting is at all levels. And in a way, just understanding that that is the pattern of things for the human being is very helpful. And it does lend forgiveness. And in your tradition, Christ is the greatest teacher of that. And forgiveness goes so far, it's so profound, far more profound than one can do justice to in a conversation like this.
Hi, I think this is slightly to do with the matter we've just been discussing, but this question is about something that I know myself and quite a lot of my friends struggle with, which is whether you can, in fact, reconcile spirituality with a sense of ambition, or if ambition is a negative word, then drive. So, for example, we talked about career and leaving behind a career. But if you are someone who wants to integrate spirituality into your life, and it's very important to you, can you also have a sense of ambition, I suppose, or a desire for a career or a path that you would like to go down, which maybe in some ways conflicts with this spiritual path?
Ambition is okay. The way I understand the creation of one's future is to be aware of the seed I plant today. And if you make sure that your decision, that of every simplest act, that seed is pure, that you decide to plant a rose or an apple tree, because you've got the ambition to make an orchard, then you plant the seed of an orchard. But it's in the way that it's how you do things, it's not what you do. I think the spiritual practice allows for the conscience to be part of the equation. And even when I say conscience, I think there's a great deal of work in removing all the beliefs that don't work for you and go deeper, because in silence I think the conscience is clear and very pure, so that even if your day is filled with being with people and having fame, that fame doesn't consume you and pollute your next decision. I would say ambition is okay.
Definitely. But the real issue would be what is the passion for? Is it for my aggrandizement, or is it for using my talents for the welfare of humanity? And if it's the second, that ambition will be very, very valuably channeled. Ambition doesn't imply selfishness. It's passion.
Isabelle, you mentioned something that resounded quite heavily, or at least I think you did, so correct me if I've completely misunderstood you. But you mentioned that the internalizing of your support network, and it's fundamentally stronger than a fragile external support network, and I fully agree with that. It can be misconstrued sometimes as a distancing in your relationships with others when you have this shift of dependency, and I just wondered, how do you manage that balance? How do you manage other people's expectations and needs when you're internalizing your support network in that way?
Well, for those who know me, I love to be with people. It's not, I think, affecting that. But when I came to the UK, the only pure thought, I think, that led me to the UK was to be independent in my relationships. So that when I'm with the other, it's not to fulfill one of my needs. When I'm with the other, it's to co-create. And it's to learn from the other. And I'm not saying that every single day it is like this. I find myself, if there is an experience of disappointment, I know that I have taken support from the other. And to maybe touch on the question that was asked previously, even if ego and greed pops up, I will see it as an opportunity for learning, that there's another doorway that I've left open. So when I develop the fullness of my spirit, I am with you to share, to do something with you. It's like a dance. And if I step on your foot, well, I have to learn, I can't blame you. So really taking life as an opportunity for learning, and that my support network I think my biggest support for me is God, and I do take a lot of. I appreciate a lot the people that I have around me, and I'm not saying it's only refined company. There's all sorts of people around me, but because I've dedicated to not be pulled by desires or likes and dislikes, if I'm with someone that, if I was to listen to the human heart, I would say, I don't like that person, I will remain in their company and see the beauty and draw from that. But not out of neediness, not out of justifying, but just out of learning, because they have something, for sure, if they've come into my path, that I must learn from. So the spirit of learning and developing that fullness of spirit so we can be together to co-create.
We have a very beautiful question from the floor, which is, how can you give up the pain that comes with recognizing attachments and giving up attachments? And I have a personal question that's sort of very similar to that. And it's, others may also resonate with it, hopefully. And it's, why is it that, or how is it rather, that when we embark on a spiritual endeavor of meditation, of prayer, of mindfulness, and generally moving towards love and peace through silence, that we can grow to become more pessimistic, we can grow to become more skeptical, more cynical, and we begin to see things that we never used to before, maybe because we were distracted, too distracted to see them before, maybe because we participated in those things before and contributed to those things. And also, why is it that when we want to, I guess, liberate ourselves from the falsehoods inside, that those falsehoods begin to sort of show themselves more frequently and with more intensity and power than they did previously?
No. Can I just ask you, I've forgotten your name, sorry, Nick. Was the question from the floor and what you said related? And if so, could you just encapsulate how? Just so I can focus more.
Sure, I guess just letting go, like one of the falsehoods being attachment, I guess. So, and that with that, letting go of attachment comes pain. So I guess that was the sort of similarity I drew between the two. Maybe they're not similar.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to say something that sounds a bit odd, but attachment is actually love. And there is a school of thought that thinks that attachments, in inverted commas, should be given up. The power of attachment is the power of love. And what really needs to be seen is that element of the love which is holding or seeking something only for oneself and letting that bit go, not the thing itself. Does that make sense?
I agree completely with this. The other side of the question, which I think came from you, how is it that the deeper we go into our path, the more we see the defects and the difficulties and the sorrow in people's eyes, and how the world is, I think, starving for the experiences that maybe we started to touch. And I would say, yes, I think it's as if our eyes become, or maybe the third eye opens and we start to see better, but invitation to go deeper and help any soul that you see or any situation, and to look at them deeper. We were maybe contributing, as you say, to those things before. We may had not realized that, but what brought us to the light was an inspiration. not a motivation as much, but an inspiration. We got ignited inside. And how do you help someone ignite inside? It's not actually through words to tell people that they can do, but to inspire someone to ignite or to maybe engage with the beauty within is to see it. I think the power of vision and the power of attitude is very important. And so as your attitude and vision towards yourself is changing, towards God is changing, towards the world in general is changing, when you meet with particular situation where the sorrow, the difficulties, maybe the behavior seemed very negative, to go beyond that and see the spirit and see the beauty. And I truly believe this is how I woken up when I met the first person that was a meditator, is whatever I said was whatever I said. And yes, before I think I embarked on my path, I was very much connected with my story. And then I realized through 1 minute, 1 second, I think, drishti, what we call that spiritual vision from soul to soul, that I was not my story. And he could see right through it. And so I said, no need to pretend or to try. And so I've experienced the power of that. So I know that to look right through the story, right through the behavior, can help inspire someone.
This is an easier one, I think. I'd really like to hear just maybe explore describing what the experience of silence and stillness is, and because I have experienced stillness, as I hope everyone has, but I find it so difficult now in this time to deepen that experience while I'm struggling to make a life or a career, or not even a career, but a life, that I feel like hearing the experience from a point of view that has experienced that more would be really inspiring or just interesting, illuminating.
Well, I wouldn't say that I have a final definition of silence. But what I'm exploring is that it's not a destination as much as a state that comes when I reunite with my true core and with God. Because of, and I think Laura was sharing that yearning that we have that not throws us but pulls some of us on that spiritual quest, is that desire to belong and that desire for peace. And I think that for the spirit, not for the human being, I'm talking here for the spirit, what is natural for the spirit is that pure silence, and it is to reconnect with its spiritual parent, God, and to see others in that way. And so if my thoughts are of that nature, I would say that my mind may not be absolutely quiet, but the quality of those thoughts seem to actually nourish and influence my decision. So a silent mind for me is not a quiet mind. It's more that there's not the desires, the pulls, the influences, the doubts. That creates noise in the mind.
Well, there are many, so many aspects to one's experience of meditation. And I think you have to find your way, which will go on all your life, and it'll change. And I think the only thing I can say in answer to your question is that we imagine silence to be, in our dualistic thinking, to be the opposite of sound or noise. And I might just encourage you to investigate the possibility that silence encompasses all noise and all movement, and they're not at war with each other. So as you sit to meditate, however you meditate, actually the invitation is one to embrace all that is as it is in that fathomless being which holds everything as it is. There isn't a war going on. And all the thoughts and the noise in the mind can be encompassed in the silence of your being. They don't have to go away. They might go away, they might not, doesn't really matter. We are very dualistic in our approach to all of this. So it's the whole rather than the segregation into that which is perfect or pure and that which is impure and imperfect. It's more the embrace of the whole. Our thinking is very good and bad. Bad is noise, good is silent. Not quite so. The noise is supposed to be there. Mind likes to think. And meditation can embrace the nature of mind, and in a way, when it does that, the mind just kind of sits down and perhaps has a little rest for a while. And then it perks up and thinks, oh, you know, it's okay. And if it's necessary for all the movement to stop, it will do for a while. And that's fine as well. Some of the difficulty is setting up the goal and our concept of the goal. And that might sound very ridiculous. And I can understand why it should sound ridiculous, because we do tend to think that meditation should be just about becoming quiet. But if you can remember the analogy of the ocean, I think that's quite helpful. The depth of the ocean is always so, and the wave is within it. And the real embrace is the whole of the ocean. It includes the waves, and knowing it as one.
I have two questions in my head. One is, do you, in terms of practice, do you use the breath or observation of the breath or of sensations on the body, physical sensations? And the other question is with regards to doubt. Do you experience doubt, and how do you manage that?
There's many ways to meditate, and as Laura said, you'll find your own way. And I think I mentioned at the beginning is that the path to spirituality is such a personal path. However, the aim for you as a soul to feel that you belong and you've come home, that you won't be able to deny when you've reached it. So whatever way that helps you, because they're really entry points. The mantras, the focusing on the breath, the dancing. I was just in Turkey and I saw the whirling dervishes, beautiful and so much love. And you could feel the silence of their minds. And Raj Yoga is just another way, and the basic 3 steps is go inwards to the soul and and seeing myself and feeling myself as a soul, not the thought that I'm a soul, but being in the awareness that I'm a soul, and then go upwards, or maybe in a way reconnecting with a more eternal, what are the truth, and one of the elements of truth that is eternal, but go beyond the transient experiences and connect with God as a soul, a beautiful silent being that speaks in his own way. And then in that connection, the soul feels even more full and even more safe and even more giving, and then open up to the world, so it's inward, upwards, and then outwards. And as Laura was saying, that meditation is not necessarily being quiet, or it's not necessarily sitting down. It really is, where am I coming from? And so I think that the thing that I would add to what Laura was saying is that silence is about aligning, basically. When I feel completely aligned with, my intention is aligned with what I understand the truth or my truth to be, I think there is a silence that is established, and the doubts will become clear. They will come, but where do I look at the doubt from? From a place of fear, from a place of being disturbed, or can I come to a place where I feel aligned, then look at the doubt? So it's as if from a place of light, I look at the confusion, and I think I see it more clearly for whatever gifts it's meant to bring me.
A question here from the floor. I find I get bored and frustrated with one style of meditation, having been exposed to a couple of different ones. Practically speaking, do you find you have to change your meditation method, be it mantra or breathing or reading, etc.?
Yes, that's an interesting question. Was that your question from the floor? I have found that the nature of the way that I have practiced as time has evolved does change. And in a way there's greater trust to employ whichever approach seems most appropriate at the time. So mantra meditation, which I was introduced to at the beginning, has remained available, but when I meditate now, I will sometimes make use of the mantra for a little while, and how long and at what point in meditation usually just speaks for itself. And for the remaining period, it's very much as I was describing, I think in my last answer. It's really the embrace in being. And the mantra is useful just sometimes to just bring the mind into more of the present. But I would add that one shouldn't be afraid, as life evolves, to venture into different routes with meditation according to what seems to resonate most powerfully.
The only thing that I would add, because I completely agree with what Laura was saying, is okay, my daily practice is to have an early morning meditation, and sometimes I'm very disposed to it, and the day before was not so eventful, so when I wake up there's not so much chatter in my mind and I can dive into my meditation. But some days I haven't resolved everything and it pops up, and stillness, pops up, and therefore I embrace the waves, and I will use 2 or 3 different ways. And one of them might be to read something that inspires me, and somehow it seems to settle. my mind and my heart. And sometimes I open a book and the answer to what pops up seems to come there. So I will nourish my mind with something that is spiritual and inspiring. Or I'll just have a chat with God and put it in front of him and challenge him. And it does seem that at one point it does settle. You know, I can go deeper and then settle into the meditation.
Question from the floor. I have been brought up with spirituality and meditation at the heart of my family. 90% of people I meet do not have this element to their life, and I've struggled with this feeling that I am therefore different, or not normal, or that I just am perhaps closer to the big answer than them. That bit is in inverted commas. How do I feel normal, and how do I not create division between those that see there is perhaps more to life and those that don't?
Well, I think the good news is that, contrary to where we started at St. James a few decades ago, when meditation was considered to be extremely weird, it's now à la mode, as they say. And the whole move towards mindfulness practice is very much in favor. So it's not so weird. But I must say, I don't know where the questioner is, this makes it slightly difficult, right? That commonly, people don't particularly want to hear about what we call spiritual. And it's best not to talk about it unless somebody actually asks or the conversation naturally opens in that direction. There's a lot of skepticism, a lot of reservation for very good reason. And I think because it's something that is deeply important to you, it's probably best advised not to talk too quickly about it, unless, as I say, there is actually a question or the situation genuinely prompts the opening of a deeper conversation. And just to accept that it's like that. There's nothing weird about a spiritual interest. It's just not necessarily common.
I think that we don't have any more questions from the floor or the panel. So I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank, I can now use it with great authority, to our remarkable speakers. Whether they like it or not, I'm sorry, but I think it was really a remarkable conversation. I'd also like to thank our panelists. I don't know how Liz gathered such an array, but thank you very much. Some brilliant questions. I'm glad I wasn't answering them. Do you want anything else to say? No. And of course, I think a huge thank you to Liz for pulling this together. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I think it's been a phenomenal evening and lovely to talk about such subjects in such good company. So thank you again. I think also some of our musicians are here. I did thank them earlier and we did applaud them, but I think another round of applause for some brilliant... think there's some treats coming. No? No? Oh, okay. No, there's not.
I'd like to thank you so much for coming, and that's to put on top of your Christmas tree. And it surpassed every expectation, wish, or hope I had to have you here answering those questions.
Thank you for organising that.
And the panel, you have something, but it would be like ping pong if I came over. So I'll do that when you finish.
Well, good to say, you're welcome to linger and chat. We do have to be out of here very promptly at 10 o'clock. So if you do have any questions you're afraid to write down, or you just like to chat to the panelists, then please do so. Thank you all very much for coming.